Hey, it's Shxrky, back again for another video, and as the title suggests, this is why gutting your back seats of your car does absolutely nothing. Alright, so I got my paper in the back again, and let's just get right into it. Alright, so this video as a whole is actually about weight reduction and how to properly distribute your weight to actually make it matter. And I do apologize in advance, this video is going to be a little scattered because I did not organize any of my notes, so it's going to be basically off the top of my head and what I can think of. Alright, so in general, when people think of power to weight ratio, they're thinking, gotta go super light so they can have so much more power. However, that is not necessarily the case in all cases. Now, obviously, on the track, I feel like this is well known, but you want to keep a 50-50 weight distribution because that matters when all the fast weight shifting, and you want to just make sure you're in control as much as you can be. But this varies per drivetrain, per circumstance, and per build. Alright, so like I was saying, taking off all your weight doesn't automatically mean you're going to be faster. It's not even going to help your acceleration, really, at all. Unless you're really breaking off hundreds and hundreds of pounds. It's not going to do anything. You're better off getting better, beefier tires so you have more contact patch. Now, if you don't know what contact patch is, it's just a fancy way for tires and how much of that tire is coming in contact with the ground. So wider tires, more contact. Obviously, you want to keep within the ratios that you're recommended. Otherwise, you're actually going to lose performance instead of gain, and you're not going to get a quick acceleration like you want. But yeah, it all varies per car, per build, per weight, per horsepower, you know. And I just want to throw out there's absolutely zero reason you should be taking away your weight, gutting everything, if your car's not even power oriented. If you have no future plans of tracking your car, don't. Just don't. It looks tacky. Unless you're putting down a board after you take away your back seats, it's gonna look like a box. It's not gonna look good. It's gonna look tacky. It's gonna look like you try to do it the cheap way. It's gonna look like you have absolutely zero idea what you're doing. Stop gutting your Civics. You have zero idea what you're doing. You need to actually go back and do some proper research before you start taking away your back seats. Alright, so the way weight is classified is a little bit more precise than just general weight. So we have sprung weight and then we have unsprung weight. Now the way to think about that is unsprung weight is your stuff like your brakes, your wheels, your tires, just that stuff that comes in contact with the ground. It's the connection between your suspension and your car, right? So sprung weight is your suspension, your chassis, your car, everything inside, your engine, your transmission, anything you have in the car that's just loose hanging around. Now, don't get it confused. You don't want to just start ripping out everything you can that has to do with the sprung weight, because you got to have a proper sprung to unsprung weight ratio. In general, you do want to keep the unsprung weight lower than the sprung weight, just because it's what comes in contact with the ground. It's what's that first contact, you know. Instead of taking all that time to gut out absolutely everything in the car, you're gonna have a super light car and super heavy wheels, tires, and brakes. It's not gonna do anything for you. It's gonna actually start throwing you off balance, and it might actually hurt your performance instead of improve it. So what you should rather look at is look into lightweight wheels, tires that are meant for it, your better brakes, but if you can, keep them lighter. It all comes into play. However, just like the last video, if you're going to be using a stock car, a hardly modified car, or just generalized street car or dailying it all the time, you don't want a lighter unsprung weight. You don't even want to mess with the weight ratio as much, because that unsprung weight is kind of just like the bushings, it's kind of an absorbent towards all that force that your car is intaking. So it will mess with your handling if you're not careful and precise with how you're shifting the weight around and how you have it distributed. So in most circumstances, it will make handling a little bit harder, which will not be fun for a street car. Of course, for a track car, this is fine. You learn how to handle it. It all comes into play. And for a track car and all that stuff, you want as light of a car as possible. You're going to go with the lightweight wheels. You're going to go with the big brakes but light brakes. You're going to just try to get rid of everything that you can. That's just how it goes. So yeah, in general, you want your unsprung weight to be lighter than your sprung weight. Now, technically, obviously, there's not a lot of weight to work with in general. I mean, some stock cars come with 26-pound wheels to start with. Some are like more like 30, some are 45. I mean, it just depends. There's just a lot less to work with to get rid of, opposed to the sprung weight, which obviously you can go lightweight for everything. You can do carbon body parts, you can start gutting everything, you can cut into your metal, you can take out your sound systems, you can take out your AC, your power steering, your cruise control. There's just a lot of stuff you can take with the sprung weight, but none of that matters if you're not focused on the unsprung weight as well. Alright, now let's get deeper into weight distribution. So, as a general rule of thumb, you generally want to keep most of that weight on the axles of your drivetrain. So for me, I have a Honda, it's front wheel drive. I want to keep most of my weight here. Of course, I want to keep it lower because center of gravity. I'll go more into that later. But I don't want a bunch of weight in the back because it'll throw off the center of gravity as well as the weight distribution, and it'll just cause me to kick out because that's not where my power is coming from. That means it's uncontrolled weight, right? So it's kind of like, let's say you're doing a hard turn. You put an apple in your trunk and you do a turn, it's going to go all over the place. You put it towards your passenger seat and it's going to move, but it's not going to move as much because it's much more controlled there because that's where the axles are. That's where my front axles are. It's where all the power comes from. It's where it's more controlled. It's where the wheels turn. This is being pulled. For a front wheel drive, your car is essentially being pulled. For a rear wheel drive, your car is being pushed because it's pushing it from the back. Now that comes more into play later down the road. And I feel like all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, it's self-explanatory. You're essentially pushing and pulling, so you're just moving along. You're moving along. Alright, and then as a general rule of thumb, in percentiles, as a front-wheel drive car, you'll want to keep about 55%, maybe 50 or 60% up front, and then 45 to 40 in the back, just because, like I said, your power's in the front. Or you can go even more, like 70 to 30, but that's definitely not recommended for most cases. It depends on what you're driving it for, what your performance is, what you're building your car for. For rear-wheel drive, you'll want to keep it more 55-45, 60-40, kind of the opposite, but that's for grip. For drift, no matter what, as a general rule of thumb, you'll want to keep it about 50-50. Maybe 45-50, depending on, rear-wheel drive, 45-50, because you still want most of that weight where your power is coming from, because that's controlled weight, like I said. So to reiterate, for your grip racing, so like the toge, you got your just generalized track grip racing, you got your drag racing, you got your rally, all that. You generally, actually, I'm not too informed on rally, so I'm not speaking for that. But for grip, you want to keep most of the power on where your power is at, or you want to keep most of the weight where your power is at, and then less where it's not. For drifting, you'll want to keep it as close to 50-50 as you can. Obviously, it varies by vehicle and by weight. But yeah, that is definitely something to keep in mind depending on what you're building. And then obviously, as a general rule of thumb, you want to keep it light. You don't want it too light unless you got a purpose for that and you got, your aerodynamics and your downforce to keep yourself grounded. And one thing you got to deal with, and I'll talk about that in a moment, is the air. Now, while we're talking about what weight you ideally want, generally, when you're going on a downhill, you'll want to keep it like a mid-weight and more towards the front. If you're a downhill specialist, you want to keep it more towards the front and like mid-weight. If you are super lightweight, there is absolutely nothing that gravity will do to help you. Because obviously, this paper's super light, it takes forever to fall, opposed to this mallet. Like, it's a general rule of thumb. If you're going uphill, this is a lot easier to raise up than the mallet, obviously. So, for downhill, you'll want to put on mid-weight. You don't want to be super heavy, because otherwise it's also going to be hard to control, and then you're going to spin out in a corner, right? Uphill, you'll want to be super light so your car doesn't have as much to push around. If you're doing downhill and uphill, keep it mid because it matters more if you're able to push up with good tires, right? And then for anything in between, so generalized flat track racing and race and stuff, you'll want to generally keep it pretty light to mid. Mostly pretty light though, because you don't have as much gravity to worry about. Now, obviously, you have inertia and you have the physics going against you when you flip over to make a corner. Obviously, that weight is going to transfer it around. It's easier to toss if you know how to toss and where to put your weight. And then, like I was saying about the air pushing against you, if you're going for a grip car, you want to generally keep your center of gravity. For the most part, center of gravity is about the middle of your. It varies per car, obviously, and per model, and even down to the weight. It's about mid of your car and down. Anything above that, it's kind of like you don't want to be top heavy. You want to be center heavy, and if you can help that, you want to put aero parts, fun little kennards and lips and, all of that fun stuff. Roof spoilers, which actually do nothing for a sedan or a coupe, unless it's a hatchback, because that's what your trunk is for. Anyways, so yeah, for the most part, you want to help cut through the air. I mean, think of it like a knife with cheese. You try to smack it with the blunt edge, you're not doing anything. If you're trying to hit it flat on like this, it's not going to do anything for you. You got to hit it with something sharp, right? So that's what we're doing with this. You got to cut through air. You got to think of it like it's an object you got to cut through. Air holds some weight, and when it's pushing against you, if you've ever stuck your head out of a car or watched your dog stick the head out of the car, the tongue automatically, it flies back. Your head, it would fly back because it's pushing against you. There's a force against it, right? So you want to be able to cut through that with the car. So especially if you're trying to be fast downhill or, uphill, sideways, generally, it doesn't matter as much with drift because you're just hitting at it sideways anyways. It's a little downplaying. But generally, you want to focus on the aerodynamics. Now, don't go too crazy. Don't put little kennards all over your car. Don't put little flaps all over your car. There's no reason to do that. You're going to look ricer. You're going to look stupid. But you just got to keep that in mind. Got to make sure you got to cut through it, like I was saying. But power to weight ratio is a real thing. But moving back to sprung and unsprung weight, and then also the center of gravity, if you were listening to anything, that also means that anything below here is a lot more important than anything that's up here. So, gutting your interior, it's not going to do shit. Upgrading your suspension, it's going to make you feel like you just put 20 more pounds of boost on your thing. Obviously, that's an over-exaggeration, but you get what I mean. Even all you have to do is mount some beefier tires. Go with 205s instead of your original 150s or, something like that. Get grippy tires. I personally do the Yokohama Advin A052s. They work pretty well. Their tread life is not great. Lasts me like 3 or 4 months. It's like 200 per tire. Not fun, but it also keeps me grounded. It keeps me from sliding out. Got good traction, got good pickup speed. That's pretty much what you want. You want to put good tires under your drivetrain to be able to move and keep traction without slipping. Because that patch of tire that's going to be touching the ground is a lot more important than taking out your back seats or gutting your trunk. Obviously, I've poked fun at it. I'll show the video above. I made a little rage bait video about why power to weight ratio was so important, and it showed me with my gutted back seat, gutted trunk, and everyone was coming in the comments not realizing I was joking. Obviously, I know there's no power to weight ratio without any power to begin with. Obviously, they also couldn't have known that I was going to be doing this with my car, full on track mode. So that was just me pre-planning. If you have no plans to upgrade your car to a performance car later on, don't gut it. Don't gut it. It looks stupid. Don't take away your AC. Don't take away your power steering. Don't take away your cruise control. Unless you really don't need it or any of those are causing issues, it's not worth the hassle. It's not worth the discomfort. I would even argue that there's no point in putting in a bucket seat unless you're going full traction, because then you just look nicer. There's no point in having a bucket seat for a car that's just gonna sit and stay with normal traffic. But yeah, sorry this video is going to be all muffled because I am wearing this, but it is way too cold out for me to not be wearing anything. Like, I can barely feel my fingers as I'm talking right now. I got my heater, and it's not really doing much for me. But yeah, obviously, I'm not gonna stop you from doing anything. If you want to gut your car, go ahead. I mean, I won't be the first one to tell you it's gonna look dumb, but I'm also not your mom. I'm not going to tell you that you can't do it. I'm not gonna govern you. I mean, this is all your choice. It's your car. I'm doing what I'm doing to my car. My car is completely gutted, but that's obviously because I'm going for performance. But yeah, if you guys really want to do some weight reduction and get some good power to weight ratio, obviously, try to take away some weight around where your drivetrain axles are. So your engine, all of the stuff around here, do lightweight. And then for the sprung stuff, and then for the unsprung, get lightweight wheels, get better tires, get better brakes, just all of that stuff. One thing I forgot to mention is the weight distribution is even important down to the side. So a lot of the time, track cars or just race cars in general will have car weights. So it's like their car scales. You put one scale under each tire. They're all connected by a wire and tell you how much the car weighs and how much each corner is putting down in weight. Now, the reason that is important is because you don't want a ton of weight on your front right side and then nothing on your front left side. And then same thing with the back. You don't want rear left side to have a ton and then rear right side to have so little, because otherwise it's throwing off your car's balance. Let's say you're in your driver's seat, right? And let's say you have a left-hand drive. You have an extra 200, not even. You have an extra 100 to 200 pounds sitting behind you. You're going to feel your car. You may not, because maybe your suspension's built like that. You're going to feel your car start to like kind of lean. And when you go into the turn, let's say you're turning to the right, you're going to feel your car kind of like sway. It's going to feel like you might tip. Now, if you were to go left, you would feel like you could take it at 100 miles an hour. Now, let's say I were to put me front left side and then someone else rear right side. It would more evenly balance it out. Obviously, you're going to feel a little bit dip and it's going to be like a little uneven, kind of like a wave. But I'm going to take the right side. I'm not going to feel like I'm going to tip over because there's some weight on the right side now. And then when I take the left side, I'm still not going to feel like I'm going to tip over to the right because I'm on the left side. So that's a little important thing to note. If you are able to get some scales, don't cheap out and get like a normal human weight scale. It's going to break. It's not meant to handle like 3,000 pounds, 4,000 pounds, you know? Get those scales, see where the weight's at, and see if you can get them pretty even on both sides. That's what I would suggest. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of weight indifference because of where your gas sits and your fluids sit, but important thing is trying to get it as good as you can and evenly distributing the weight. That is one of the most important parts of drifting and grip driving, because without proper weight distribution, you're just going to slide out. You're going to hit a tree, you're going to fly off the track, you're going to spin out when you try to do a drift, you're going to oversteer, understeer. There's just all these factors that play into it. Obviously, it varies by car, it varies by your build, but yeah, that is the end of the video. But let me know if I missed something, and let me know if I'm like wrong about something. This is obviously my own research. I'm not a certified mechanic. As I have said before, this is just me in my garage working on a car, researching things for me, and then also sharing it with you. So, it's so cold in here, bro. I'm getting my ass. I quit.